I should begin by telling you what kind of woman my cousin Rosalind was, because most of what follows will make no sense without it. She was not beautiful in the way that stops a room, or rather she was, but that was not the first thing you noticed. The first thing you noticed was that she had already noticed you, assessed you, and formed a working opinion that she was too courteous to share. She had a quality of attention that most people found unsettling, and a small number found, eventually, to be the most compelling thing they had ever encountered. She was 23 years old when she inherited Vane's End, and she had been running it in practice for 2 years before that, since our uncle's health had prevented him from doing anything more strenuous than supervising from the parlor window. I am Declan Vane, schoolmaster, Rosalind's older cousin by 6 years. I taught the village boys their Latin and their arithmetic, and I watched the 14 months I am about to describe with the attention of a man who teaches for a living and therefore cannot stop himself from noting when something instructive is happening in front of him. What was instructive, primarily, was this: that 2 of the most capable people in 3 counties found each other insufferable for approximately 4 months, tolerable for another 4, and quietly essential for the final 6, in that order, and with the kind of inevitability that would have been obvious to anyone except the 2 people most directly involved. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me begin at the beginning. Rosalind inherited Vane's End in October, on a Tuesday. Our uncle died peacefully, which was what he had always done everything, and left the farm to her with a letter of instruction that covered the management of the south field, the disposition of the winter barley, the known unreliability of a man named Hobbs who worked the north fence line, and a single line about marriage. Do as you think best, Rosie. You always have. She kept the letter in the desk drawer and referred to Hobbs's section at least twice a month. The farm was 240 acres, which was not enormous but was not nothing, with good soil in the valley and a respectable flock that Rosalind had learned to manage with the same systematic thoroughness she applied to everything. She could read a field for drainage better than most men twice her age. She could negotiate a wool price with the Harwick merchants without blinking, and she had, twice, gotten a better rate than the men who'd been doing it for 20 years. They did not like this. She did not particularly require them to. By October of the year she inherited, she had received 3 proposals of marriage. The first was from Mr. Galt, a neighboring farmer of decent character and limited imagination, who had calculated, reasonably but incorrectly, that a woman on her own with 240 acres would be eager for consolidation. Rosalind had thanked him with such genuine kindness that he had not, at first, understood she was declining, and when she clarified, he had nodded with the thoughtful expression of a man revising a calculation. The second was from a solicitor from Harwick who had handled our uncle's affairs, and who had perhaps confused professional proximity with personal opportunity. Rosalind had handled this one more briefly. The third was from young Ashworth, the vicar's son, who was 20 and sweet, and had been in love with her since they were children, and whom she had declined so gently and so firmly that he had recovered within 3 weeks, and subsequently directed his affections toward the Fenwick girl, to everyone's satisfaction. I record all of this not to suggest that Rosalind was cold. She was not cold. She was precise, which is different. She had a clear sense of what she wanted and what she was willing to accept, and she saw no reason to obscure this in the performance of an uncertainty she did not feel. This was the woman who, in the 2nd week of November, 3 weeks after she formally took possession of Vane's End, received a visit from the Duke of Ravenscroft. Cormac Ashby, Duke of Ravenscroft, was 36 years old and owned the 4,000 acres that bordered Vane's End to the east and north. He was not, by any of the conventional measures, a man who made unannounced calls on his neighbors. He had a reputation in the county for competence and for directness, and for an opinion on every subject that he delivered without preamble and without apparent concern for whether it was welcome. His tenants respected him. His peers found him useful in a committee and difficult at dinner. His housekeeper, Mrs. Peel, who had been at Ravenscroft for 22 years, said once in my hearing that the Duke was the most straightforward man she had ever served, which was either a compliment or a warning depending on how you took it. He arrived at Vane's End on a grey November morning on horseback, alone, and requested to speak with the owner of the property. Rosalind was in the south field. He went to the south field. I know what happened next because Rosalind told me that evening, with the particular precision she used when she wanted to be accurate rather than entertaining, and because Hobbs, who was working the fence line 30 yards away and had the hearing of a man who has spent his life outdoors, confirmed the key details when I asked him later. The Duke rode to where Rosalind was standing with her farm manager, a capable man named Stokes, examining a section of the drainage channel that had been inadequately cut the previous spring. The Duke looked at the channel. He looked at Rosalind. He said, and I quote, because both Rosalind and Hobbs were precise about the phrasing, "That channel needs recutting. The angle is wrong. You'll have standing water in the east corner by February." Rosalind looked at him. She said, "I know. We were just discussing whether to recut it this week or wait until the ground firms after the frost." A pause. "After the frost," the Duke said. "The ground's too soft now. You'll lose the edges." "That's what Stokes thinks," Rosalind said. "I'm not yet convinced. A week of standing water at the channel's mouth could compromise the root stock in the barley bed faster than a soft edge that can be firmed in February." Another pause, longer. "That's not wrong," the Duke said. "No," said Rosalind. "It isn't." Hobbs told me that the Duke had looked at her with an expression he could not characterize with any precision, except to say it was not the expression most men wore when a woman corrected their drainage advice. "I'm Ravenscroft," the Duke said. "I share your eastern border." "I know who you are," Rosalind said. "I'm Rosalind Vane. I own this farm." They looked at each other. "I'll recut it this week," she said to Stokes, "and Hobbs confirmed the edges in February." She turned back to the Duke. "Was there something else?" she asked, politely, with the expression of a woman who has several more things to attend to before dark. He said there was nothing else. He rode back to Ravenscroft. I heard this account at dinner, and I noted, as a schoolmaster, that my cousin had won the first argument by the simple method of being right. I did not say this. I ate my soup. He came back the following week. Not for any ostensible reason, or rather, with an ostensible reason so thin that even Rosalind, who preferred to accept stated reasons at face value unless there was specific evidence against them, could see through it. He said he had ridden past and noticed the south gate was hanging at the wrong angle. "It's been hanging at that angle for 11 years, Rosalind said. "My uncle adjusted it so the latch cleared the post. If you straighten the gate, you'll have to replace the latch." "I see," said the Duke. "The latch is original," Rosalind said. "My grandfather installed it. I wasn't suggesting you replace it." "Good," said Rosalind, and waited. He looked at the gate. He looked at the farm. He looked at Rosalind with the expression Hobbs had described, the uncharacterizable one. "Your winter barley is in late," he said. 5 days, she said. "I know. We had a wet fortnight. It'll catch up. The soil temperature in the east field is 2 degrees warmer than the west, which is where the late-planted fields usually lag." He said nothing. "Did you measure your soil temperature this year?" she asked, not aggressively, genuinely curious. "No," he said. "You should," she said. "It changes the planting calculation significantly. I can show you the figures from the last 3 years if you want them." He looked at her. "Yes," he said, "I want them." This was, by any reasonable measure, not how one expected the Duke of Ravenscroft to respond to anything. His land agent, a careful man named Hollis who had worked for him for 8 years, told me later that year that the Duke had come back to Ravenscroft that afternoon and asked for the soil temperature records from the previous 3 seasons, and that Hollies had produced them with the bewildered efficiency of a man who has been given an unusual instruction from a source he trusts. I will tell you what I think happened in that second visit, because I had time to consider it over the 14 months that followed. I think the Duke of Ravenscroft, who was the most competent man in the county, and had known it for long enough that it had become a simple fact rather than a vanity, rode to Vane's End expecting to find what most people in the county expected to find: a woman of some capability who would nonetheless benefit from guidance. He found instead a woman who had the soil temperature figures for the last 3 years, and had noticed that his eastern border field ran warmer than his west, which was information about his own estate that he did not have. This did not make him defensive, because he was not, underneath the bluntness, a small man. It made him interested. An interest, in a man of Cormac Ashby's temperament, was a more dangerous thing by far than admiration. He came 3 more times in November, with reasons that grew progressively thinner. By the 4th visit, Rosalind had stopped pretending there was a reason, and simply invited him in to look at the yield tables she was preparing for the winter accounts. He sat at the farm table in the kitchen and looked at her figures with the serious attention of a man reviewing a document that matters, and when he found an error, a transposition in the 3rd column, he said so, and when Rosalind looked and confirmed the error and corrected it without visible embarrassment, he said nothing and went back to reading. "You have a good manager in Stokes," he said after a while. "I know," she said. "Your fence line in the north quarter needs." "I know," she said again. "I'm doing it in March when the ground firms. If I do it now, I'll spend twice as much on materials." He turned a page. "You're quite certain about March," he said. "I'm quite certain about most things," Rosalind said, without looking up from her own column. A silence. Then, and Stokes was in the room and confirmed this later, the Duke made a sound that was somewhere between a short exhale and something that might, in a different man, have been the start of a laugh. "Yes," he said, "I can see that." I was not there for that exchange, but when Rosalind told me about it that evening, I noticed that she told it without the dry precision she usually applied to accounts of the Duke's visits. She told it with something slightly different in her voice, which a schoolmaster who has been listening to people talk for 15 years would describe as amusement that has not quite decided what to do with itself. I noted this. I said nothing about it. I had learned by the 4th week of November that the correct approach to the situation developing between my cousin and the Duke of Ravenscroft was to watch carefully and speak with great economy. December brought a village assembly, which Rosalind attended with the same systematic goodwill she applied to community obligations, and which the Duke of Ravenscroft attended for the first time in 3 years, a fact that the village registered with the alert attention of people who had seen him ride past Vane's End 4 times in November and were drawing their own conclusions. I went to the assembly because I go to every assembly. I am the schoolmaster. It is expected. The assembly room in Harwick was not large, but it was adequate, and it had a good fire and tolerable music, and the particular social energy of a country gathering in December. Everyone who had been largely at home for the preceding month taking the opportunity to establish what everyone else had been doing. Rosalind arrived in a gown she had owned for 2 years, which fit her well and was the color of winter wheat, and she was claimed immediately by Mrs. Carroll, the magistrate's wife, who had opinions about the farm and was not shy about sharing them. I watched Rosalind receive these opinions with the patience of a woman who has heard them before and is waiting for the next thing. The Duke arrived 30 minutes later and stood near the door for a moment with the air of a man calculating the room before he committed to it. This was, I had learned by watching him over the previous weeks, his actual method. He did not perform confidence, He simply took a moment to assess before acting. It looked like arrogance from a distance. Up close it was something more practical. He saw Rosalind. She had not seen him yet. She was still with Mrs. Carroll, now joined by the Fenwick sisters, and she was nodding with the focused expression of a woman giving full attention to a conversation she has already resolved. He watched her for a moment before he moved. I watched him watch her. I was aware, standing by the punch table with my second glass of something that was not quite what it claimed to be, that I was witnessing a man who had ridden to Vane's End 4 times in November for reasons of increasing transparency, and who was now standing in an assembly room for the first time in 3 years, looking at a woman across a room with an expression I could finally characterize. It was the expression of a man who has discovered something important and has not yet decided what to do about it. He crossed the room, not quickly, not the trajectory of a man who wanted to seem eager, but the deliberate movement of a man who had decided to go somewhere and was going. Rosalind looked up when he was 3 steps away. She did not appear startled. She appeared, and I was watching her face carefully at this point, as though she had expected him, which was interesting because she had not known he was coming. "Miss Vane," he said. "Your Grace," she said. "Have you resolved the question of the drainage channel?" She looked at him. "We recutted it last week. Hobbs will firm the edges in February." "As you decided." "As I decided," she confirmed. There was a beat of silence. Around them, the assembly continued its business. No one was watching them directly, which meant, in a Wiltshire assembly room in December, that everyone was watching them peripherally. "Are you dancing?" he asked. "I hadn't planned to," she said. "Are you?" "I hadn't planned to." A pause. "The music isn't bad," she said, "for a village assembly." "No," he agreed, "it isn't." They stood together for a moment, not dancing, watching the room. "The North Quarter fence," she said. "Are you doing yours before or after the frost?" "Before," he said. "I've reconsidered." "You'll spend more on materials." "I know," he said. "I've factored it." She considered this. "What changed your calculation?" "I looked at the soil temperature records," he said. "The North Quarter runs colder than I thought. If I wait until March, I risk 3 weeks of mend work instead of 1. Rosalind was quiet for a moment. "That's a good reason," she said. "I thought so," he said, and there was something in the way he said it, not boastful, just even, that made Rosalind look at him with the direct attention she usually reserved for yield tables. "We should compare our fencing contractors," she said. "I've been using Alderton's firm. They're reliable and they don't overcharge." "Send me their details," he said. "I will," she said. They stood for another moment, not dancing, not quite talking about fencing anymore, in the middle of a December assembly that the village of Harwick would discuss for the next 3 months. January brought Captain Fenn. I should have mentioned Captain Fenn earlier, because he had been on the horizon since October, when he'd come to visit his aunt in the village and had seen Rosalind at the market, and ridden to Vane's End 2 days later with an introduction from the aunt, and a manner that I can only describe as comprehensively charming. Captain Fenn was 32, recently returned from service, handsome in the direct way that requires no careful looking, and possessed of exactly the kind of confident, easy address that fills a room and makes a person feel they are its center. He was not stupid. He was not unkind. He was simply, and this is the thing that I, as her cousin and as a man who paid attention to things, saw quite clearly, and Rosalind did not at first. A man who admired Rosalind for the version of her that was most decorative and least inconvenient, and who had decided, without quite examining the decision, that the parts of her he found somewhat challenging would become more manageable once they were married. He was wrong about this, as he would have discovered, but he was persistent, and he was charming, and Rosalind, who was, despite all evidence to the contrary, a woman who could be moved by sincerity when she believed it, did not dismiss him immediately. The captain spent January and February at his aunt's, which gave him occasion to call at Vane's End with some frequency. He was useful in small ways. He had opinions about horse management that were not entirely without merit, and he was good company at dinner. He did not attempt to correct Rosalind on farm matters, which was either wisdom or indifference. I was not certain which. The Duke of Ravenscroft, during this period, came to Vane's End 3 times. Each time he came, he and Rosalind had an argument about something, the merits of a particular seed merchant, the question of whether the village road needed resurfacing and who should bear the cost, the appropriate response to a drainage dispute with a neighboring farmer. And each time the argument ended with one or both of them arriving at a position neither had held at the outset, which is the mark of an argument worth having. He never came when Captain Fenn was there. I do not know if this was deliberate. In March, Captain Fenn asked Rosalind to marry him. She did not accept immediately, which I noted with the careful neutrality of a schoolmaster who has a strong opinion he has decided not to share. She asked for time to consider. He gave it to her with the grace of a man who was confident in his eventual answer. I went to see Rosalind the next evening. She was in the kitchen with the account books, which was where she always was when she was thinking about something difficult. "He's asked you," I said. "He has," she said without looking up. "What are you thinking?" She was quiet for a moment. "I'm thinking about what it would look like in 10 years, she said. "Whether the things I find charming now would still be charming then. Whether the things he finds manageable about me would still be manageable. And I don't know," she said. "That's why I asked for time." I sat down at the table. "The Duke of Ravenscroft came by yesterday," I said, "when you were in the East Field." She looked up. "What did he want?" "He left a note about the Alderton fencing contractor. He's used them for the North Quarter, and he wanted to tell you they were reliable." A pause. "He could have sent that through the post," she said. "Yes," I said, "he could have." She looked at me, I looked at her. We are cousins who have known each other since childhood. We have a substantial vocabulary of looks, and the one she gave me now was the one that meant do not say what you are clearly about to say. I did not say it. "I'll write and thank him," she said. "Yes," I said, "I expect you will." She declined Captain Fenn in April. Not, she told me, because of the Duke. I believed her. She declined Captain Fenn because she had spent March thinking carefully about what she had asked herself the evening after his proposal, and the answers she arrived at were not the answers a woman should arrive at when she is considering marrying someone. Fenn took it well, better perhaps than I expected. He stayed in the village through May, which was perhaps optimistic, and then went back to wherever soldiers go when they are not on leave, and the village forgot about him with the speed that villages forget about people once the interesting part is over. The Duke of Ravenscroft, when Rosalind told him, they were standing in the North Quarter fence line, inspecting Alderton's work, and she mentioned it as a matter of information rather than confidence, as though she was telling him about a change in the barley schedule, said, "He wasn't right for you." Rosalind looked at him. "How do you know?" "He agreed with you too much," the Duke said, "about the things that mattered." She frowned. "Most people would consider that a virtue." "Most people haven't watched you disagree with something," he said. "You think better when there's resistance." A pause. "That is a very strange thing to say to someone," Rosalind said. "It's accurate," he said, and moved down the fence line. She looked after him for a moment, then she followed. This was April. They had been arguing for 5 months. The London season happened because Rosalind's aunt, not my mother, a different aunt, the Harwick one who had opinions about everything and money enough to act on them, decided that Rosalind had been running a farm long enough and required a season. And since Rosalind was fond of her aunt and found the logic unobjectionable, She agreed to 6 weeks in London beginning in May. I know what happened during those 6 weeks primarily from Rosalind's letters, which were detailed and dry and contained observations about London society that a schoolmaster found very satisfying to read. The ballrooms were crowded. The men were various. 3 of them were interesting in a surface way that collapsed quickly under any actual conversation. 2 more were genuinely intelligent but had the specific quality of intelligent men who have never been seriously challenged by a woman and therefore don't quite know what to do when it happens. Several wanted to talk about the farm, which she found preferable to those who wanted to talk about her. The Duke of Ravenscroft was in London for 2 of the 6 weeks. I learned this not from Rosalind's letters, which did not mention him, but from the letter I received from his land agent Hollies, who was in London briefly for a commission business, and who mentioned, with the careful casualness of a man who has noticed something and isn't sure whether to say it, that the Duke had attended 3 events he would not normally attend, and had spent most of each one in the vicinity of Miss Vane of Wiltshire. I read this letter twice. I put it in my desk. I wrote Rosalind a letter asking how the season was proceeding, and she wrote back a detailed account of 2 drainage systems she had visited in Kent that were quite instructive, and a single sentence at the end. The Duke of Ravenscroft was here for a fortnight. He has views on London that are not entirely wrong. This was, from Rosalind, a great deal. She came back from London in June with a better understanding of drainage design and a quietness I had not seen in her before, which was not unhappiness. Rosalind was rarely unhappy, having a temperament that converted most difficulties into problems to be solved, but something more like the stillness of a woman who has been thinking about something for a long time and has arrived at the edge of a conclusion. She is not yet ready to speak. The Duke rode to Vane's End in the 2nd week of July. I was at the farm that afternoon. I often came on Thursdays, ostensibly to see Rosalind and in practice to see the thing that had been developing between my cousin and the most capable man in the county for the previous 8 months. I had a schoolmaster's investment in outcomes. He arrived at 3. Rosalind was in the hayfield, which was at the height of its work. He went to the hayfield. I went with him, at a distance sufficient to maintain plausible neutrality. They stood in the field among the workers, and they had an argument. Not an angry argument. None of their arguments were angry, not really. This was about the merits of a new hay rake design that had been introduced the previous season, and that the Duke had adopted and Rosalind had declined. She had declined it, she explained, because the new design was faster but less precise, and she was willing to accept slower and more exact over faster and less controlled. He had adopted it because at 4,000 acres, speed had a different calculation than at 240. The calculation is different for you, she allowed. That doesn't make the design better. It makes it more useful to your specific situation. And I'm arguing that your specific situation might benefit from a similar recalculation, he said. You have 6 workers and a compressed harvest window. Speed is not nothing. At the cost of precision, it's worse than nothing, she said. I lose more at the margins than I gain in the middle. Show me the figures. I don't need to show you the figures. I know them. Then explain them. She explained them. Standing in the hayfield in July, in the long afternoon light, surrounded by workers who had heard this particular dynamic often enough to have formed quiet opinions about it, Rosalind Vane explained her figures to the Duke of Ravenscroft with the calm detail of a woman who knows she is right and is willing to do the work of demonstrating it. He listened. You're right, he said when she finished. I know, she said. Your margin calculation is better than mine, he said. I hadn't weighted the precision variable correctly. She looked at him. You can recalculate it. The new design might still work at your scale. It might, he said. I'll look at it. They stood for a moment in the hayfield. The workers continued their work with the practiced inattention of people paid to notice only what is relevant. "You didn't come about the hay rake," Rosalind said. "Not a question." A pause. "No," he said. "Then why did you come?" Another pause. The July light was long and warm, and the field smelled of cut grass and good summer soil. "I came," he said, "because I have been coming to Vane's End for 8 months, and I have not yet found a reason to stop." Rosalind was very still. "That's not a reason," she said. "That's an observation." "Yes," he said, "I know I'm working up to the reason." This was, as I noted from my position 30 yards away, the first time in 8 months of watching them that I had seen the Duke of Ravenscroft say something imprecise. He was not, by nature or habit, a man who worked up to things. He said things directly and accepted the consequences. Working up to it was new. "You have time," Rosalind said after a moment. "I'm not going anywhere." And she went back to the hay. The summer was good. The harvest came in well, which matters in the account I am giving because Rosalind's mood in a good harvest year was different from her mood in a difficult one. Not lighter exactly, but more expansive, more willing to be in the evening of a thing rather than in the problem of it. The hayrake argument, which she had won comprehensively, had been followed by 3 more visits, each more straightforward than the last. In August they had argued about the best approach to a disputed water right between Vane's End's West Field and a neighboring farmer named Marsh. This one took an afternoon and a good part of the evening, and ended with a written agreement that Rosalind drafted and the Duke reviewed, and both of them improved in 2 different places. Marsh signed it the following week. He signed it, Rosalind told me, with the particular satisfaction of a woman who has resolved something correctly. "Did you tell Ravenscroft?" "He was there when Marsh signed. He came with me." I considered this. The Duke of Ravenscroft, who had 4,000 acres of his own affairs and the management thereof, had come to Vane's End to stand beside Rosalind Vane, while a neighboring farmer signed a water rights agreement. "That's interesting," I said. "It was practical," she said. "He'd helped draft it." "Yes," I said, "of course." She looked at me, the look that means do not say it. I did not say it, but I was thinking it with considerable clarity. September was when it went wrong. It went wrong in the particular way that things go wrong between 2 people who are both very capable and both somewhat proud, not through malice, but through a misunderstanding that neither of them addressed quickly enough and both of them let grow into something larger than it needed to be. What happened was this. There was a question of the Ravenscroft Eastern Field, the one that bordered Vane's End directly. The field had a long-standing drainage issue that affected both properties, and Rosalind had proposed, in August, a joint solution that required some expense on both sides but would permanently resolve the problem. The Duke had agreed in principle, and they had begun the preliminary discussion of costs. In September, the Duke received a proposal from a land development consortium about the Eastern Field. The proposal would have resolved the drainage issue through a different mechanism, at no cost to him, and, as he had been told by the consortium's agent, minimal impact on the neighboring property. He had not mentioned this to Rosalind. He had listened to the consortium's agent. He had asked questions. He had not yet decided anything, but he had asked questions, which meant he had taken the proposal seriously, which meant he had spent 3 weeks considering an arrangement that would have affected Vane's End substantially, without telling Rosalind it was on the table. She found out from Stokes, who had heard from Alderton's fencing man, who had heard from someone at the consortium. I was at Vane's End when Stokes told her. I watched her face go through the particular sequence it goes through when she has been given information she did not expect and is deciding what to do with it. She was quiet for a long time. "How serious was his interest?" she asked Stokes. "Can't say, Miss Vane. Just that he met with them twice." She was quiet again. "Thank you, Stokes," she said, and Stokes left, and she sat at the kitchen table with her hands flat on the wood and the expression of a woman who is deciding something. "Rosalind," I said. "Not now, Declan." She wrote him a letter that evening. I did not read it. I know from how long she sat at the desk, and from the number of sheets of paper I saw her start and set aside, that it took some time to write. When she finished, she had the expression of someone who has said the necessary thing and is not certain how it will be received. The letter, as I understood it from what she told me later, said that she had heard about the consortium proposal, that she did not object to him considering any arrangement for his own property, that she objected, clearly and specifically, to being the person most affected by the arrangement who had been least informed about it, and that she had considered him a man who said things directly, and she wished he had said this one. He came to Vane's End the following morning. I was not there. I have only Rosalind's account, which she gave me that evening in the kitchen, more quietly than she usually gave me accounts of things. He had said, "I should have told you." She had said, "Yes." He had said, "I wasn't certain anything would come of it. I didn't want to raise a concern until there was a real one." She had said, "The concern became real the moment you listened seriously enough to ask questions." He had said, "You're right." She had said, "I know." He had said, "I've declined the proposal." She had said, "That isn't the point." He had said, "I know." There had been a long silence. She had said, "I expect better from you." He had gone. That was September. October and November were very quiet. He did not come to Vane's End. She did not write. The village noted his absence with the same careful attention with which it had noted his presence, and various theories circulated, none of them accurate. I visited Rosalind twice in October, and once in November. She was managing the farm with the same systematic competence she had always brought to it, and she was not unhappy in any visible way. She had the farm to run, and the winter accounts to prepare, and the fencing to check and Hobbs's fence line to manage, and all of these things required her, and she gave them her full attention. But the expansiveness of the good harvest summer was gone. There was a stillness in her that was different from her usual composed, quiet, tighter, more managed. I mentioned none of this. I ate my soup. December. I was in the market on a Tuesday when I encountered the Duke of Ravenscroft at the wool merchant's stall, which surprised me, since he had a land agent for market business. We looked at each other. "Vane," he said. "Your Grace," I said. A pause. "How is Miss Vane?" he asked, the question of a man asking something he has been not asking for 3 months. "Well," I said, "the farm is in good order. The winter accounts are ahead of schedule." "Good," he said. Another pause. "I am a schoolmaster. I have been teaching boys who don't want to do a difficult thing for 15 years. I know the face of someone who knows what they need to do and is finding reasons not to do it." "She was right," he said, "about September." "Yes," I said, "she was. I've thought about it a great deal." "I expect you have." He looked at the wool, he looked at me. "I'm not a man who makes errors of this particular kind," he said, which was not boasting, just factual. I was not thinking clearly about what it meant. To not tell her. "What did it mean?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "It meant I was protecting something I hadn't yet named," he said. "That wasn't fair to her." I considered this. It was, for the Duke of Ravenscroft, a remarkably precise piece of self-examination. "She's at Vane's End," I said. "She's there most mornings." He looked at me. "The evenings, too," I said. "It's December, it gets dark early." He bought 3 yards of wool he had no earthly use for, and rode back to Ravenscroft. He came to Vane's End on a Thursday in the 2nd week of December. I know it was Thursday because I was there. I had not told Rosalind he was coming, because I did not know with certainty, and also because I had a schoolmaster's sense of when intervention was helpful, and when it was better to let things proceed at their own rate. He arrived in the late afternoon when the light was already going gray. Rosalind was in the parlor with the account books. Mrs. Tanner, who helped with the house, showed him in, because that is what Mrs. Tanner did. I was in the kitchen, which shares a wall with the parlor. I want to be clear that I was not listening at the wall. I was reviewing my school records, which is a task that requires focus, and the wall in question was simply the wall nearest the table I was using. I heard the following. Ravenscroft, I owe you a better account of September than I gave you. Rosalind, nothing, meaning she was listening. Ravenscroft, what I told you was true. I hadn't decided anything, but you were right that it was not the true point. I listened seriously to a proposal that would have affected you directly without telling you it was on the table. The reason I didn't tell you was I was not ready to examine the reason. Rosalind, and now. Ravenscroft, and now I've had 3 months to examine it. A pause. Ravenscroft, I didn't tell you because I wasn't yet ready to know what my telling you would mean, about what your answer would reveal, about what I would have to acknowledge about myself, about what Vane's end means to me and why. Rosalind, silence. The particular silence of a woman who is very still. Ravenscroft, I've been coming here for 13 months. I have an estate of 4,000 acres and a full staff and a calendar of obligations, and I have ridden to a 240-acre farm in the next valley 13 times in 13 months, because there is no conversation I would rather be in. Rosalind, you could have said that. Ravenscroft, I know I'm saying it now. A pause. Rosalind, you were afraid. Ravenscroft, not afraid, careful, which in this case came to the same thing and was less useful than it usually is. Rosalind, you're usually more useful. Ravenscroft, yes, I'm aware. A pause longer. Rosalind, what are you asking me? Ravenscroft, I'm not asking anything I haven't already indicated by writing here 13 times. I'm arriving at the indication more directly. Rosalind, you could still ask it directly. Ravenscroft, I could. A pause. Ravenscroft, will you marry me? Not a question. The way he said everything as a fact he was proposing and waiting to see if she would confirm it. A very long pause. Rosalind, you understand that I will continue to disagree with you about drainage. Ravenscroft, I expect nothing less. Rosalind, and fencing contractors. Ravenscroft, I've already had Aldertons for the North Quarter. They're excellent. There's nothing left to disagree about there. Rosalind, I'll find something. Ravenscroft, I know you will. Rosalind, and I will not be managed. Ravenscroft, Miss Vane, no one has successfully managed you in 23 years. I have no expectation of being the first. A pause, the sound of a chair. Rosalind, then yes. I closed my school records. I sat for a moment at the kitchen table, listening to the silence from the parlor, which had the quality of a room in which two people have just said something, and are standing in the aftermath of it with the particular stillness of people who have wanted to stand in exactly this place for a long time. I got up. I put the kettle on. I thought it was likely that someone would want tea. They were married in March in the Harwick church, on a morning that was cold and then abruptly mild, the way March mornings are in Wiltshire, uncertain and then committed, the way the best things are. The farm was handed over to Stokes for the day, with a list of instructions so detailed that Stokes later told me he had never felt more confident and less necessary simultaneously. Rosalind wore ivory, which suited her. The Duke wore his best coat, which was dark and well cut, and which he wore with the same absence of fuss he brought to everything. He looked at her when she came in, that same look, The one Hobbs had seen in the south field in November and couldn't characterize. The one I had been watching since December and could now characterize precisely. The look of a man who sees something clearly and is very glad of it. She looked back with the look that meant she had assessed the situation and found it correct. I performed the reading because Rosalind had asked me to, and because it seemed right that the person who had watched the whole thing from the beginning should be there at its resolution, recording the outcome with the accuracy I had tried to bring to all of it. The first year of their marriage was, by every account I could gather, consistent with the preceding 14 months in all the ways that mattered. They argued about the Southfield drainage, which Ravenscroft wanted to reconfigure and Rosalind agreed with in principle but not in execution. About the question of whether to expand the veins end flock, which required a cost-benefit analysis that occupied several evenings. About the new soil management technique that the Agricultural Society had published in March, which they both read and reached different conclusions from, and which led to a field experiment whose results I will not have until next autumn. They also, and I record this because it is accurate, and because a schoolmaster values accuracy above sentimentality, appeared to be very happy, not in a performed way, in the way of two people who have found the person who makes them most entirely themselves, which is the quietest and most durable kind. Hobbs told me in May that the Duke had spent 2 hours in the south field with Rosalind, reviewing the drainage configuration, and that he had watched them from the fence line with the attentiveness of a man who has been on this farm for 30 years and knows when something is right. They were arguing about the angle, Hobbs said. Yes, I said, I expect they were. Didn't stop, he said, not the whole 2 hours. No, I said. I don't imagine it did. Hobbs looked at the field. Good argument, though, he said, both of them back and forth, like they were working something out. They usually are, I said. He nodded, satisfied with this, and went back to the fence line. I walked home through the Wiltshire fields in the late spring afternoon, past the south gate with its grandfather's latch still hanging at the angle my uncle had set it to, the angle that worked, that had always worked, that didn't need to be changed just because someone new had arrived and found it unusual. Some things, I thought, are exactly as they should be. And Rosalind Vane had always known the difference.